When you picture ancient Rome, you picture marble, white columns against a blue sky, emperors in purple, senators arguing in the Forum, gleaming temples, roaring crowds in the Colosseum, an empire that ruled the known world. That is the Rome of the movies, the Rome of the postcards, the Rome we were all taught to admire. Now ask a simple question. Who cleaned the marble? Because someone did. Someone scrubbed those gleaming floors before the sun came up. Someone carried the water, emptied the pots, lit the fires, cooked the food, dressed the senator, raised the children, and made the whole shining machine of the greatest city on earth actually run. And that someone was not free. In Rome at its height, perhaps 1 in 3 people in the city was a slave. Hundreds of thousands of human beings who owned nothing, not even themselves, and without whom the entire civilization would have stopped in a single morning. Today we do not follow an emperor. We follow the person who empties his chamber pot. This is day 1 of A Week in Ancient Rome, and today we follow the slave. It is the year 120. The city is Rome, the largest city on earth. Let us step inside. Before dawn. He is awake before everyone, because he is always awake before everyone. That is the first rule of his life. He sleeps on a thin mat in a windowless cell off the kitchen of a large house, a domus, belonging to a wealthy family on one of Rome's better hills. The room is barely wider than his body. There is no lock on the door, but he does not need one, because there is nothing to steal and nowhere to go. He is perhaps 25 years old. He was born in this house, to a mother who was also a slave, which makes him what the Romans call a verna, a home-born slave, and it is the only life he has ever known. He rises in the dark and moves through the sleeping house by memory, the way you move through a place you have known your whole life. His first task, every single day, is the fires. He kneels at the kitchen hearth and coaxes last night's embers back to life, feeding them kindling until the flames catch. Because in a few hours, this fire will cook the breakfast of people who will never once wonder how the fire got lit. Then the braziers that heat the main rooms. Then the lamps. By the time the family stirs, the house must already be warm, lit, and clean, as if it simply exists in that state on its own. This is the deepest skill of his life, and no one will ever call it a skill. To make enormous amounts of labor completely invisible. A well-run Roman house was supposed to feel effortless. Every drop of that effortlessness was somebody's sweat, produced in the dark, before anyone with the right to sleep in had opened their eyes. Dawn. As the light comes, the house fills with the others, because he is not the only one. He is one of dozens. A wealthy Roman household was not one servant. It was a whole hidden population, and each slave had a narrow, specialized role. There is the cook and his kitchen slaves, the doorkeeper, sometimes chained to his post, the slaves who carry water from the public fountain, all day, endlessly, because the house has no plumbing of its own, the nurse who raised the children and the tutor, often a highly educated Greek, himself a slave, who teaches them philosophy and rhetoric, the hairdresser, the dressers, the litter bearers, big, strong men who will carry the master through the streets on their shoulders. The accountant who keeps the household books, and may be more literate than the master himself. This is one of the hardest things for us to understand about Roman slavery. So it is worth saying plainly, it was not based on race, and it was not always based on brute labor. A Roman slave might be a farmhand worked to death in a chain gang, or a brilliant Greek doctor, a trusted business manager, a beloved children's nurse. What united them was not the work. It was the single, total fact that they were property. They could be bought, sold, beaten, or used in any way the owner wished, and the law was almost entirely on the owner's side. A slave was, in the eyes of Roman law, a thing that could speak. Our man knows exactly where he stands in this hidden hierarchy. He is a house slave, which is better than the mines, and better than the fields, those are the places they threaten you with. He has learned, over 25 years, the 1,000 small skills of surviving inside another person's power. When to be visible and when to vanish. Which moods mean danger. How to be so good at his work that he is valued, because a valued slave is a safer slave. Morning. The master wakes and the morning ritual begins, and it is a ritual built entirely on invisible hands. Our slave is one of those who dresses him. The toga, that famous symbol of the Roman citizen, is a nightmare of a garment, a huge semicircle of heavy wool, 5 meters wide, with no buttons, no pins, no fastenings of any kind. It cannot be put on alone. It has to be wound and folded and draped around the body by trained hands, and held in place by the way it is arranged. And it takes real skill to make the folds hang correctly. So every morning, a free Roman citizen, who considered slaves to be barely human, stood with his arms out like a child, while a slave dressed him with the care of an artist. The whole gleaming image of Roman dignity, the togaed citizen striding to the forum, was physically assembled, every day, by someone who had no rights at all. Then comes the salutatio, the morning reception. The master, like all men of his class, is a patron, and each dawn a crowd of his clients, poorer free men who depend on his favor, gathers in the atrium to greet him, ask for help, and receive small gifts of money or food. It is our slave's job to manage this crowd. He knows every face, every name, every rank. He controls who waits and who is admitted, who gets the warm greeting and who is kept at the door. For an hour each morning, this man who owns nothing quietly controls the access of free citizens to the powerful. And they know it, and they are polite to him, because a slave close to the master is a slave worth staying friendly with. It is the strange half-power of his position, utterly powerless in law, and yet inside these walls, holding threads that free men have to respect. He has learned to live in that contradiction. It is the only room he has. By midday, the master has gone out, carried through the streets on the shoulders of the litter-bearers, and the house exhales. This is the closest thing to freedom our slave will feel today, the hours when the owner is elsewhere. The work does not stop. There is cleaning, fetching, preparing for the evening, the endless carrying of water. But the air is different. The slaves can speak to each other in something like normal voices. They can be, for a few hours, people among people instead of tools in a house. And here, in the ordinary talk of the kitchen, is the thing the marble never shows you. They had full inner lives. They fell in love. Though Roman law did not recognize slave marriage, slaves formed lasting unions and families anyway, and fought to keep them together, even when an owner's sale could shatter them in an afternoon. They had friendships, rivalries, jokes, griefs. They worshipped their own gods, often the gods they or their parents had brought from distant conquered lands. They were not a grey mass of slaves. They were individuals, each the hero of their own story, exactly as you are of yours, living that story inside a cage they did not choose. Our slave carries something specific through these hours, a hope so large he barely lets himself look at it directly. There is a word for it: manumission, freedom. Because Rome, unusually in the ancient world, freed its slaves in enormous numbers, and a freed slave of a Roman citizen became, astonishingly, a citizen himself. It was possible. Slaves could sometimes earn and save a little money of their own, a fund called the peculium, and buy their freedom. Or a master might free a favored slave in his will, as a final act of generosity that cost the master nothing once he was dead. Our man has been saving, coin by coin, for years. He does not know if it will ever be enough, but it is the engine that gets him up in the dark. Serve well, stay valued, stay hopeful. Maybe, one day, own yourself. Afternoon. In the afternoon, a small thing happens that reminds him exactly what he is. The master returns earlier than expected, in a bad mood. Some slight at the baths, some business gone wrong, it does not matter. And a cup is dropped. Not by our slave, by a nervous young kitchen boy, new to the house, who fumbles a fine glass vessel and shatters it on the stone floor. The room goes still. Everyone knows what a broken luxury object can mean. The master's anger, looking for a target all afternoon, finds one. And in this moment, our slave does the thing that 25 years have taught him. He steps forward. He takes responsibility he does not owe, absorbs the blame, calms the master with the exact words and tone he has learned will work, and quietly gets the terrified boy out of the room. He has the authority, as a senior slave, to do this. He also has the scars, somewhere, to know why it matters. Because this is the flaw beneath his whole life. The thing the peculium and the manumission and the half-power in the atrium can never quite paper over. His body is not his own. Under Roman law, he can be beaten at will. He can be tortured if the household is ever investigated. Slave testimony in a Roman court was, by law, only valid if extracted under torture, on the theory that a slave would otherwise simply lie. He can be sold tomorrow, sent to the fields, separated forever from everyone he loves, and no law on earth will stop it. He manages the master's clients and dresses the master's body, and is trusted with the master's secrets. And he is, at any moment, one bad mood away from ruin. He steps forward for the boy because someone, once, maybe, stepped forward for him. It is the only justice available in a world that offers him none. The small mercies slaves show each other, underneath the notice of the free. Evening. In the evening, the house transforms, because the master is giving a dinner, a cena, and a Roman dinner party was a performance, staged entirely by slaves. Our slave is everywhere and nowhere. The dining room is lit with dozens of oil lamps he filled and trimmed. The couches are arranged where the guests will recline. Course after course flows from the kitchen, dishes designed to impress, carried by slaves who must be silent, graceful, and invisible, refilling wine cups the instant they empty, anticipating every need before it is spoken. A guest at a fine Roman dinner was surrounded by attentive human beings he was trained not to see. They were part of the furniture of luxury. To notice them, to thank them, would have been almost strange. And so our slave stands against the wall in the lamplight, watching the most powerful men in the neighborhood eat and drink and boast, listening to everything, because slaves heard everything, which is exactly why they were so often trusted and so often feared. He knows more about these free men's real lives, their debts and affairs and weaknesses, than their own wives do. He holds all of it and says nothing, and refills the cups. Somewhere in the conversation, a name comes up. A senator, an important man, giving a great banquet of his own later this week. The kind of event the whole hill is talking about. Our slave files it away out of habit, the way he files everything. He does not yet know that before this week is out, the machinery of the city will carry him, for one evening, into that very house. That the threads connecting the bottom of Rome to the top run through people exactly like him. Tonight, he only knows the cups are emptying, and it is his job to fill them. Night. When the guests have gone and the lamps are guttering, the house finally, slowly, goes quiet. Our slave is the last to finish, as he was the first to begin. He clears the last of the dinner, banks the fires so they will hold until morning, checks the doors. The family sleeps in their warm rooms. He returns to the thin mat in the windowless cell off the kitchen, his body aching, the day beginning and ending, as always, in the dark. But he does not sleep at once. He lies in the black and does the thing that keeps him human. He counts. Not sheep, coins. The small, secret hoard of his peculium, hidden and growing. the price of a human being who happens to be himself. He is close. Closer than he has ever been. He runs the number in his head the way the healer of another age ran her plants and the elder ran his map. A piece of knowledge held against the dark, the one thing that is truly his. And he lets himself imagine it, just for a moment before sleep. The day he stands before the magistrate and is touched on the shoulder and told he is free. The small cap of freedom, the pilus, they will place on his head. The new name he will carry as a citizen of Rome, his master's name, joined to his own, marking him forever as freed, but free. His children, if he has them, born not as property, but as citizens of the greatest city on earth. It is not impossible. In Rome, unlike almost anywhere else in the ancient world, it is not impossible. That is the cruelty and the strange mercy of the whole system at once. It owned him completely, and it left one door, and he has spent his life walking toward it. Outside, the great city sleeps, 1 million people, a third of them owned by the other 2/3. The whole shining machine banked like a fire for the night, ready for the invisible hands to light it again before dawn. Tomorrow he will rise first, as he always does. But tomorrow we will not. Tomorrow we leave the quiet hill and go down into the roar of the working city, to the man whose fires never go out, whose ovens feed 1 million mouths, and who lives stacked 6 floors high in a tenement that might collapse or burn before the week is done. Day 2, the baker. So that was day 1 in ancient Rome, the person the marble was built to hide. He lit the fires, dressed the citizen, managed the clients, staged the banquet, and absorbed the blows. And through all of it, he remained something the law refused to admit he was. A full human being, with a family he fought to keep, gods he prayed to, and a hope he saved for coin by coin in the dark. Rome ran on hundreds of thousands of people exactly like him. Not a grey mass of slaves, but individuals. Some worked to death in mines and fields. Some trusted with fortunes and secrets. All of them property. All of them the heroes of their own unwritten stories. And here is the part that makes Roman slavery so strange to modern eyes. The door of freedom was real. Rome freed slaves on a scale no other ancient society matched, and a freed slave became a citizen, his children born free. The system was brutal beyond anything we can comfortably imagine, and it left that one narrow way out, and men and women spent their whole lives walking toward it. Both things are true. That contradiction was Rome. Thanks for watching Time Warp Cities. Subscribe, because this week we are climbing, from the slave who cleans the marble, all the way up to the emperor who owns it, one life at a time, and every one of them is connected. Tomorrow, the ovens of Rome. This is day 2 of a week in ancient Rome, and today we follow the baker. It is the year 120. The city is Rome, the largest city on earth. Let us go down into it. Before dawn, while the rich sleep on their quiet hills, the working city is already awake, and it is loud. Our baker lives and works in a very different Rome from yesterday's marble house. He lives in an insula, an apartment block, one of the tens of thousands of tenements where the vast majority of Rome's people were packed. Picture a building of brick and timber, 5, 6, sometimes 7 stories high, crammed against its neighbors along a narrow street, with shops on the ground floor and apartments stacked above. His bakery is the ground floor. His family lives just above it. And above them, floor after floor, live dozens of other families in rooms that get smaller, darker, and more dangerous the higher you climb. This is the Rome almost no one pictures. Not the temples and the forums, the housing. And it was rough. The higher floors had no running water, no toilets, no kitchens, and no easy way out if something went wrong. You hauled your water up by hand from the fountain in the street. You used a pot or the public latrine down the block. And 2 fears lived in the walls of every insula, permanent and unspoken. collapse, and fire. Because these buildings were thrown up fast, cheap, and tall, by landlords chasing rent in a city desperate for space, and they fell down. They genuinely, regularly fell down. And they burned, constantly, because a city of 1 million people cooked and lit their homes with open flame, stacked 6 floors high in timber-framed boxes pressed wall to wall. Fire was so common and so catastrophic that it shaped the whole rhythm of the city. And here is the bitter irony of our baker's life. Of all the trades in Rome, his is one of the most likely to start the very fire everyone fears. He works all night with a roaring oven on the ground floor of a building full of sleeping families. So he is careful. He is more careful than almost anyone in the building because he has the most to be careful with. He wakes in the blackest part of the night while his wife and children sleep in the rooms above, and he goes down to wake the fire. Dawn. The bakery comes to life in the dark, and it is a factory in miniature. Bread was not something a Roman family usually made at home. Most apartments had no oven, and lighting one would have been madness in those buildings. So Romans bought their bread, fresh, every day, from bakeries like this one on nearly every street. That made the baker, the pistor, one of the most essential workers in the entire city. And his bakery was not a quaint little shop. It was a small, hot, hard-working production line, and our baker runs all of it. First, the grain becomes flour. In the back of the bakery stand the mills, great hourglass-shaped stones that grind wheat into flour when the top stone is turned. And turning it is brutal work. In many bakeries it was done by slaves or by animals, donkeys harnessed to the millstones, walking in endless circles. A Roman bakery was often half mill, half oven, and the milling was the grinding, joyless heart of it, going around and around in the dark before dawn. Then the dough. Flour, water, a little salt, and leaven. A piece of yesterday's fermented dough kept back to raise today's. The same trick of wild yeast that sourdough bakers use now. It is mixed, sometimes in a mechanical kneading trough, and worked into dough and divided and shaped. The Romans made many kinds. Round loaves scored into segments like a wheel, so they could be broken into portions. Denser breads for the poor, finer white bread for those who could pay. Our baker knows them all by feel, the way a craftsman knows his material, because he has made them 10,000 times. And then the oven, the great domed brick oven, wood-fired, that he lit hours ago and has been feeding and watching ever since, because everything depends on the heat being right. Too cool, and the bread is heavy and pale. Too hot, and it burns. And burnt bread is wasted grain, and wasted grain is money he does not have. He reads the oven the way a sailor reads the sea. And as the sky begins to grey, the first loaves go in, and the smell of baking bread rolls out into the waking street. The smell that, in every city, in every age, means the day has begun and there will be something to eat. Morning. By full morning, the street outside his door is a river of people, and many of them are coming to him. Because bread in Rome was more than food. It was politics. It was survival. It was the thing that kept 1 million people from turning on their rulers, and the Roman state knew it better than anyone. There was a system, one of the most remarkable in the ancient world, the grain dole, the annona. The government of Rome handed out free or heavily subsidized grain to hundreds of thousands of its citizens every month as a right. Think about what that means. The most powerful empire in the world had worked out, through hard experience, that a hungry city is a dangerous city, and so it fed its people, at enormous cost and effort, shipping grain across the sea from Egypt and North Africa in a vast fleet, storing it in gigantic warehouses, and distributing it to the citizen poor. This is the real meaning behind a phrase you have probably heard: bread and circuses. Panem et circenses. Give the people bread and give them games, and they will not rebel. It was cynical. It was also, in its way, a functioning welfare state 2,000 years ago, built not out of kindness, but out of fear of exactly what a hungry mob could do. Our baker sits at the point where that system meets the street. Some of his customers bring their own dole grain and pay him only to grind and bake it into bread. Others buy his loaves outright. All morning they come, slaves sent down from the wealthy houses to buy the good white bread. Working men grabbing a cheap loaf to eat on the way to a job. Women from the upper floors of his own building. Children sent by their mothers with a coin clutched tight. He knows most of them. A neighborhood baker was a fixture, a face everyone saw every day, a small hub in the vast machine that kept the city fed. And he works the crowd with the easy, tired skill of a man who has done this every morning for 20 years. A word for this one, a joke for that one, a sharp eye for the coin that is short or the customer who owes. His hands are permanently pale with flour, cracked and burned in places from the oven. He is not rich, but he is not nothing either. A successful baker in Rome could do well. Some did very well. There is a famous tomb still standing in Rome today, built by a freed slave who became a bread contractor and grew wealthy enough to have his tomb shaped like the very ovens and equipment that made his fortune, decorated with scenes of bread being made. A baker could rise. Our man dreams, quietly, in that direction. Midday. At midday, the frantic pace eases, and we see the rest of his world, the family, the building, the neighborhood. His wife works beside him. His trade is a family trade, as most Roman businesses were. She minds the front, handles the customers and the money, keeps the accounts in her head, while he minds the ovens and the mill. Their children grow up in flour, underfoot in the shop, learning the trade the way all children of working Rome learned their parents' work, by being in it, every day, from the time they could walk. If the gods are kind, a son will take over the bakery. That is how a working family holds on in Rome. You build something small and solid, and you pass it down. But holding on is precarious, and everyone in the insula knows it. Look up, from the street, at the building he lives in, and you see the whole social ladder of Rome stacked vertically. The ground floor and the first floor, his level, are the most desirable. Solid, accessible, closest to the street and the safest way out. The higher you climb, the worse it gets. The top floors were cramped, flimsy, freezing in winter and baking in summer, home to the poorest of the free poor, the people one bad month from the street. In Rome, unlike a modern city, the penthouse was the worst place to live. Height meant poverty. Height meant danger. When a fire started on the ground floor, often, ironically, in a shop like a bakery, the people at the top were the ones who could not get out. Our baker carries that knowledge quietly, the way the slave yesterday carried his. Every night, he damps his fire down with a care that borders on ritual, because the lives stacked above his head depend on his oven behaving. It is a strange kind of power and a strange kind of burden. The man who feeds the building is also the man most able to destroy it. He has never had a serious fire. He is proud of that in a way he would never say out loud. It is, in its own way, as much an achievement as the bread. Afternoon. In the afternoon, with the morning's bread sold, our baker does the other half of his job, the part that is not baking at all, but belonging. He is a member of a collegium. Across Rome, workers in the same trade banded together into these associations, part guild, part social club, part burial society. There was a baker's collegium, and butchers, and builders, and dozens of others. They were among the few ways ordinary working Romans, who had almost no political power as individuals, could count for something together. The collegium shared knowledge, set customs, helped members in trouble, and crucially, made sure its members got a proper funeral and were remembered, which mattered enormously to Romans, who feared being forgotten almost more than they feared dying. So part of his week is this: the meetings, the shared meals, the small dues paid into the common fund, the network of other bakers who are half his rivals and half his brothers. When his oven cracks and he needs it rebuilt, it is these men who know the right mason. When grain is short and prices spike, it is around this table that the bakers of the district decide, quietly, together, how to handle it. In a city that offered the working man almost no formal power, the Colosseum was where he found a little. Our baker is respected in his. It has taken him years, and through the Colosseum runs all the news and gossip of working Rome, including, this week, the thing on everyone's lips: the games. There are gladiatorial games coming to the great arena, the vast stone oval the whole world now knows, and the whole city is talking about the fighters, who will fight, who will win, who will die. Our baker will be there in the roaring crowd, like almost everyone in Rome, free and slave alike, because the games were the one place the whole city came together. He does not yet know that one of the men the crowd will scream for, one of the fighters whose name is already being traded around the Colosseum table, is a person we are going to follow tomorrow, down onto the sand, where the price of glory is measured in blood. Evening. As evening comes, the working city eats, and the baker watches Rome do the thing he makes possible. This is his quiet satisfaction, the thing that gets him through the brutal early mornings. Walk the streets at dusk, and everywhere, in doorways and on steps and around small fires, people are eating bread, his bread, and the bread of 1,000 bakers like him. The rich have their elaborate dinners, staged by slaves like the man we met yesterday. But the vast, ordinary majority of Rome eats simply: bread, olives, cheese, a little wine cut with water, perhaps something hot from a street food stall, because most people had no kitchen and bought their hot meals ready-made, exactly as a modern city grabs food on the way home. Rome ran on street food and fresh bread. It had to. A city where almost no one could cook at home is a city that must be fed by its shops every single day. And so, in a way the senators would never admit and the emperor rarely thought about, men like our baker were as essential to Rome as any general. An army wins territory, a baker keeps the capital from starving. Miss enough mornings, let the grain fleet fail, let the ovens go cold, and no amount of marble or legions will hold the city together. The Romans understood this in their bones. It is why they built the Annona. It is why bread comes first in bread and circuses. Fill the belly first. Everything else, the games, the temples, the glory, comes after. He eats his own bread with his family in the room above the shop, tired, flour still in the creases of his hands, the oven banked and quiet below them. It is not a grand life, but it is a solid one, built with his own hands, feeding his own children and half his street. In a city that could crush a working man without noticing, he has carved out something real. Night. Before he sleeps, he goes down one last time, to the oven. This is the ritual that ends his every day. He checks the fire, he damps it down, rakes the embers safe, makes certain, and then makes certain again, that nothing is going to catch in the dark while the building sleeps above him. 5, 6 floors of families, his own among them, their lives resting partly in his careful hands and the behavior of his fire. He has done this 10,000 nights. He will do it 10,000 more, if the gods allow. It is the most important thing he does, and no one will ever thank him for it, because it is the disaster that does not happen, and no one ever notices the fire that never starts. He climbs the stairs to the room where his wife and children are already asleep. Tomorrow he will wake in the black again, before the whole city, and go down and wake the fire and begin. And Rome will get its bread, as it did yesterday, as it will tomorrow, one baker at a time, one street at a time, 1,000,000 loaves against 1,000,000 hungers, holding the greatest city on earth together with flour and heat and the willingness of ordinary people to rise before dawn. Outside, the insula creaks and settles. Somewhere in the vast city, a building burns tonight, as one always does, and the fire watchmen run toward it with buckets and hooks against a blaze they can rarely win. But not here, not tonight. Our baker damped his fire, as he always does, and the families above him sleep, as they always do, never knowing how close the edge is, or who keeps them from it. Tomorrow, we leave the ovens and the tenements behind, and we go to the one place all of Rome, slave and free, poor and rich, went together, the arena. Down onto the sand, to a man who is worshipped like a god and owned like a tool, whose job is to fight and bleed and maybe die in front of 50,000 screaming people. Day 3, the gladiator. This is day 3 of A Week in Ancient Rome, and today we follow the gladiator. It is the year 120. The city is Rome, the largest city on earth, and today all of it is going to the games, before dawn. He wakes in a cell, and the first thing he feels is his own body. Every scar, every old break, every deep ache. A gladiator's body is a ledger of everything that has ever been done to it, and he reads it each morning before he is fully awake. He is perhaps 28, which is old for this work. He has survived more fights than most men ever see, and each one is written somewhere on him. He lives in a ludus, a gladiator school, and it is, in plain terms, a prison. A barracks built around a training yard, with cells for the fighters, high walls, and guards. The men here are owned by the lanista, the man who runs the school, buys the fighters, trains them, feeds them, and rents them out to whoever is paying to put on games. Some of the men in this ludus are slaves, bought at market. Some are condemned criminals, sent here to die more slowly and more profitably than a simple execution. And a few, this is one of the strangest facts about the arena, are free men who volunteered, who signed away their freedom, swore a terrible oath to be burned, chained, beaten, and killed if their master commanded, and did it anyway, for money, for fame, for the sheer violent thrill of it. The arena was so glamorous, so intoxicating, that free men sold themselves into it. Our man was not a volunteer. He was a slave, bought young, marked out early for his size and his speed, and his refusal to die. But the line between the categories blurs once you are inside. Whatever they were when they came in, the men of the ludus are now something specific. Professional fighters, athletes of death, the most highly trained and highly valued human weapons in the Roman world. Dawn. The morning in the ludus looks less like a prison and more like something you would recognize, an elite training camp. Because here is a truth that cuts against everything the movies tell you. Gladiators were not disposable nobodies flung onto the sand to be slaughtered in job lots. They were expensive. A trained gladiator represented a serious investment, years of feeding, training, and medical care. And the lanista who owned him did not want him dead any more than a modern club wants its star player crippled. A dead gladiator is a dead asset. So the whole system, brutal as it was, worked hard to keep these men alive, fighting, and valuable for as long as possible. They train like professional athletes, because that is what they are. Our man drills for hours against a wooden post and against sparring partners, with weapons often deliberately heavier than the real thing, so the real thing feels light. Every gladiator is trained in a specific style, a fixed set of equipment and tactics. There was a whole taxonomy of fighter types. Some fought with a large shield and short sword. Some carried a net and trident, fast and unarmored, trying to entangle a heavier opponent. Some wore fish-crested helmets. Some fought almost blind behind a visor. Some were matched deliberately against an opposite type, so the fight became a living game of scissors, paper, stone that the crowd could read and bet on. Our man has his style, drilled into his muscles over years, until it is more his than his own name. And they are cared for like athletes too. The ludus feeds them a heavy, deliberate diet, lots of barley and beans, so much that gladiators had a nickname that meant barley eaters. A diet designed to build a layer of fat over the muscle. Why fat? Because a layer of fat protects the blood vessels and nerves. A slashing cut that would cripple a lean man might only open the fat and bleed dramatically without disabling him. Good for the fighter, and good for the crowd, who loved the sight of blood. There were doctors attached to the schools. Some of the finest medical knowledge in the Roman world was developed treating the wounds of gladiators. Everything about the system was engineered to produce a man who could fight, survive, be patched up, and fight again. Morning. As the city fills the great arena, we should be honest about what that arena was and what it was not. The building the whole world now pictures, the vast stone oval, the Colosseum, was already there in his time, and it was a wonder, an engineering marvel that could hold 50,000 people, fill and empty them through dozens of numbered gates in minutes, shade them with a vast retractable awning worked by sailors, and even, on occasion, be flooded for mock naval battles. Beneath the sand ran a hidden world of tunnels, cells and lifting machines, where animals and men and scenery could be raised into the arena as if by magic. It was the most advanced entertainment venue on Earth, and it was built for one purpose: spectacle. But the day at the arena was not just gladiators, and it was not one long bloodbath from dawn to dusk. It had a shape, a program that everyone knew. The morning belonged to the beast hunts, exotic animals from across the empire, lions, leopards, bears, displayed and hunted and killed in stage spectacles that showed off Rome's reach to the ends of the earth. The middle of the day, the lunch hour, belonged to the executions. Condemned criminals put to death in the arena, the grimmest and lowest part of the program, when many of the respectable spectators went home to eat. In the afternoon, the main event, the part the whole city had come for, belonged to the gladiators. Our man fights in the afternoon. He is not a criminal to be butchered at lunch, he is the headline. And this distinction mattered enormously, even inside the strange moral world of the arena. The gladiator was a paradox the Romans themselves never fully resolved. Legally degraded, ranked among the lowest and most disreputable people in society, and yet admired, desired, celebrated, a symbol of exactly the courage and discipline and contempt for death that Rome most prized in itself. To die well in the arena, without flinching, was considered genuinely noble. A people obsessed with honor watched their most dishonored men and saw, uncomfortably, their own ideal reflected back. Midday. In the hours before he fights, our gladiator does something the roaring crowd never sees. He waits. This is the real texture of his life, the part no statue and no mosaic captures. Not the glory, the waiting, the long, hollow hours in the holding cells beneath the arena, listening to the crowd above, the muffled roar rising and falling as the morning spectacles run their course. He has done this many times. He knows the taste of his own fear, and he knows how to manage it, the way the healer of another world managed hers. Not by pretending it is not there, but by working alongside it. Panic gets you killed. Calm keeps you alive. So he breathes and checks his equipment and waits. He thinks, as fighters do, about the thing that hangs over every bout, the possibility of death, and the strange, specific rules around it. Because most fights did not actually end in death, and this is another thing the movies get wrong. A gladiator was too valuable to kill casually. Many fights ended when one man was wounded or exhausted and raised a finger to appeal for mercy. Then the decision went to the giver of the games, the man who paid for the whole spectacle, often reading the mood of the crowd, whether the beaten fighter would be spared or killed. A man who fought bravely and lost was very often spared to fight another day. The crowd respected courage, and the owner did not want to pay the steep penalty for a killed fighter unless the drama demanded it. Death was real, and it was always possible, but it was the exception, not the rule. A successful gladiator might fight many times and live, and some, a rare, glittering few, won something almost unimaginable: freedom. A gladiator who fought superbly, who won again and again, and captured the love of the crowd, might be awarded the rudis, a wooden sword, the symbol of release from the arena. It was the ultimate prize, the thing every man in the cells below dreamed of in his darkest hours. Fight well enough, long enough, survive enough, and you might walk out of this life a free man, rich, famous, alive. Our gladiator carries that hope, the way the slave carries his coins and the baker guards his fire. A single, narrow door in a life with almost no doors at all. He is close. He has won and won. Perhaps one more great fight, perhaps this one. Afternoon. And then it is time, and he walks out into the light. The gate opens, and the sound hits him like a wall. 50,000 voices, the biggest crowd a human being in this era could ever stand before. All of them focused on the sand, on the fighters, on him. The arena floor is raked smooth, bright under the sun. The awning throwing shade across the tiers of spectators stacked by rank. The emperor and the senators closest to the action, then the knights, then the ordinary citizens, then, at the very top and the very back, the poor, the enslaved, the women, the whole pyramid of Rome, assembled in stone, looking down at two men and a patch of sand. Somewhere in that vast crowd is the baker from yesterday, and slaves from the great houses given the day off to attend, and free, poor and rich alike, because the games were the one place all of Rome came together, the one experience shared by the emperor and the man who lives on the 6th floor of a tenement. That was part of their power. The arena was where Rome looked at itself, all of it at once, and roared. The fight itself is fast and technical, and nothing like the clumsy hacking of the movies. These are trained professionals. There is a referee on the sand, the fights had rules, and officials to enforce them. There is footwork, timing, feint and counter, the deep skill of two men who have trained for years reading each other in real time with their lives on the line. The crowd, expert from a lifetime of watching, follows every exchange, groaning and roaring at the near misses and the clever moves the way a modern crowd follows a great match. It is athletic, it is beautiful in a terrible way, and it is deadly serious, because underneath the skill, the iron is real and the stakes are real. We will not narrate the blow by blow or whether a killing stroke falls today. What matters is the thing the crowd feels and the fighter knows in his body, that on this sand, in front of this city, a man's courage is on display more nakedly than anywhere else in Roman life. Win or lose, live or die, the one unforgivable thing is to fight like a coward. And our gladiator, whatever else the world has taken from him, has never done that. It is the one thing that is entirely his. Evening. Afterward, for the ones who walk off the sand alive, comes the strangest part of a gladiator's strange life: the fame. Because a successful gladiator was a genuine celebrity, and Rome adored him. His name was known across the city. His face and fights were painted on walls and worked into mosaics that still survive today. Graffiti scratched into the plaster of Pompeii records gladiators as heartthrobs, the one the girls sigh for, the idols of their day. Wealthy women pursued them. Ordinary people collected little clay figurines and lamps, shaped like famous fighters, the ancient equivalent of a poster on a bedroom wall, or a jersey with a number on the back. Children played at being them. A great gladiator was, for the length of his career, one of the most famous human beings in the Roman world. And this is where the paradox becomes almost unbearable to hold. This man, adored by an entire city, is still a slave. He can be sold tomorrow. He fights because he is told to. The love of 50,000 people does not make him free. It makes him valuable, which is not the same thing. He is a star locked in a cell, a hero who is also a possession, celebrated for his courage by the very people who own his life. Rome could not decide whether he was a god or a thing, and so, in its way, it treated him as both, showering him with glory in the afternoon and locking the door on him at night. He eats his barley in the ludus that evening among the other survivors, the fight still ringing in his body, the roar of the crowd still in his ears. Some of the men he trained beside are not at the table. That is the arithmetic of his life, and he has learned to sit with it, the way the slave sits with his powerlessness and the baker sits with his fear. Tomorrow there will be more training, and somewhere ahead, if the gods and the crowd and the lanista all align, the wooden sword, freedom, the door. Late, in his cell, he does the thing that keeps him going through a life most of us cannot imagine surviving. He counts his fights, and he counts his chances. He is close to the number that might earn his freedom. He has the crowd's love, and the crowd's love is a kind of currency in this world. He allows himself, in the dark, to imagine the rudis placed in his hand, the oath dissolved, the gate opened for the last time, walking out of the ludus a free man, perhaps to train the next generation of fighters, perhaps to open a school of his own, rich and scarred and alive. It happens. Rarely, but it happens. And rarely, but it happens, is enough to get a man through one more night, one more fight, one more morning reading the ledger of his own broken and unbroken body. Outside the walls of the ludus, the great city talks about him. In the tenements and the wine shops and around the Colosseum tables, Rome is replaying the afternoon's fights, arguing over the fighters, trading their names, his name, the way people have always traded the names of the athletes they love. He cannot hear it. He is locked in a cell, a national hero who owns nothing, not even the door. He lies in the dark, his body aching, the arena still roaring somewhere behind his eyes, and he holds the one thing they cannot take. The knowledge that he walked out onto that sand, in front of all of Rome, and did not flinch. Tomorrow, more barley, more training, and the wooden sword, somewhere ahead, on the far side of however many fights the gods still ask of him. But tomorrow, we leave the sand entirely, and the blood, and the roar, and we go to the quietest, strangest kind of power in all of Rome. To 6 women who are not owned by anyone, who answer to no man, not even the emperor, who guard a fire that must never, ever go out, and who would be buried alive if it did. Day 4, the Vestal Virgin. This is day 4 of a week in ancient Rome, and today we follow the Vestal Virgin. It is the year 120. The city is Rome, the largest city on earth, and at its very heart, a fire is burning. Before dawn. She wakes in a house unlike any other in Rome, and her first thought, before she is even fully awake, is the fire. She lives in the house of the Vestals, a large and beautiful residence beside the round temple of Vesta in the Roman Forum, the ceremonial, sacred heart of the entire empire. It is a world of quiet courtyards and colonnades and statues, a place of calm in the middle of the loudest city on earth. And it is hers. In a way, almost nothing in Rome belonged to a woman. She shares it with the other Vestals. There are 6 at any time, and their households, in an ordered, disciplined, deeply sacred life. She has been here a long time. She was chosen as a girl, somewhere between 6 and 10 years old, taken from her family in a solemn ceremony and dedicated to the goddess Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, of the sacred fire, of the flame at the center of every Roman home and, above all, the flame at the center of Rome itself. And when she was chosen, she took on a vow that would define the whole of her life, to serve for 30 years and, for all of those 30 years, to remain absolutely, perfectly chaste. Untouched. Virgin. 30 years. 10 to learn the rites, 10 to perform them, 10 to teach them to the girls who come after. She is somewhere in the middle of that span now. No longer the frightened child who was chosen, not yet the elder who will train the next generation. She is at the height of her powers, a woman who has given half a lifetime to a fire, and who holds, because of it, a place in Rome that kings would envy. Dawn. Her first and most sacred duty, every single day, is to make sure the flame still burns, and to tend it so it never fails. She goes to the temple in the early light. The fire of Vesta is not a metaphor and not a decoration. It is a literal physical fire, tended on a hearth, and keeping it alive is the central task of her entire order. The Vestals take shifts, day and night, in an unbroken chain of watchfulness stretching back, the Romans believed, to the very founding of the city. There is always a Vestal awake, always someone watching the flame, because the one thing that must never happen is for it to go dark. And if it does go out, through carelessness, through a lapse in the watch, it is a catastrophe of the highest order. The Romans took it as a terrifying omen, a sign that the goddess had withdrawn her favor, that something was deeply wrong at the heart of the state. The Vestal, on whose watch the fire died, could be stripped and beaten by the highest priest of Rome himself. The flame would have to be rekindled through a specific sacred ritual, never casually. This is the weight our Vestal carries every day. Not just a duty, but the belief that the safety of the entire city rests in part on her attention. Rome's luck, Rome's survival, tied to a flame she must not let fail. She tends it with the focus of someone who has done this 10,000 times and never once let it become routine. She feeds it, watches it, keeps it clean and bright. It is the still point around which her whole life turns. Morning. But here is what surprises people most about the Vestals. Guarding the fire made them not prisoners, but some of the freest and most powerful women in the entire Roman world. Understand what Roman women normally faced. An ordinary Roman woman spent her whole life legally under the authority of a man. First her father, then, often, her husband. She could not vote, could not hold office, and had limited control over property and her own affairs. That was simply the shape of a Roman woman's life. The Vestal was the great exception. The moment she was chosen, she was released from her father's legal authority, and she never passed into a husband's, because she would never marry. She answered to no man. She could own property, make a will, and control her own money, freely, in her own name, something almost unheard of. She could give evidence in court without the oath other witnesses needed, because a Vestal's word was simply trusted. She had reserved seats of honor at the games, down among the elite, not banished to the back with the other women. When she went out, she was preceded by an official normally reserved for senior magistrates, and people made way. If she happened to meet a condemned prisoner being led to execution and swore the meeting was accidental, the prisoner was pardoned. Her presence alone could cancel a death sentence, and she was trusted as no one else in Rome was trusted. The Vestals guarded the wills and treaties of the most powerful men in the empire, documents so important they could not be left anywhere they might be tampered with. Emperors deposited their own wills with the Vestals. In a city built on ambition, betrayal, and the endless hunger for power, these 6 women were the one institution everyone believed to be beyond corruption. Their integrity was, in a sense, part of the machinery of the state. So our Vestal moves through her morning as a woman of real authority. Petitioners seek her favor. Her presence at a public ceremony confers weight and legitimacy. She has at her disposal a freedom and a respect that the richest matron in Rome, even the wife of a senator, could only dream of. She traded marriage and children and ordinary life for something no other woman could have: to stand in Roman society as her own person, owned by no one. midday. And yet, at the very center of all that power and freedom sits the single, absolute condition and its unthinkable penalty. The vow of chastity was not a gentle ideal. It was the load-bearing wall of the entire institution, and the Romans believed the safety of the state depended on it as literally as it depended on the fire. A vestal's purity was thought to be bound up with Rome's well-being itself, and so the punishment for breaking it was designed to match that cosmic weight, and it was one of the most chilling things in all of Roman practice. A vestal who broke her vow of chastity could be buried alive. The Romans had a horror of directly killing a vestal. Her body was sacred, and to spill her blood was forbidden. So they devised something that let them destroy her without technically doing so. The condemned vestal was placed in an underground chamber with a small amount of food and water and a lamp, and then sealed in and left. The state's hands were clean. It had not killed her. It had simply stopped tending her, the way she had failed to tend what was entrusted to her. It is a punishment of terrible, deliberate symmetry, and it hung over every vestal, every day, for 30 years. Now this was rare. Across many centuries, only a handful of vestals were ever executed this way, and accusations were often tangled up with politics, with moments of crisis when Rome, frightened by war or disaster, went looking for someone whose impurity could explain its bad luck. A vestal was sometimes less a criminal than a scapegoat, sacrificed to make sense of a catastrophe. But rare is not the same as unreal. Our vestal knows the stories. She knows the chamber exists. She knows that the same city that showers her with honor, that trusts her with emperor's wills and pardons prisoners at her word, has built into her life a door that opens, if she fails, onto the dark. She carries this the way every person we have met this week carries the hard floor beneath their life, the slave his ownership, the baker his fire, the gladiator his sand. Her power is immense, and it is real, and it rests on a single vow, and the penalty for breaking it is to be walled into the earth. Both things are true at once. That was the bargain. She has lived inside it for half her life. Afternoon. In the afternoon we see the other side of her strange life. Not the fear, but the profound, quiet importance of what she actually does. The vestals were woven into the sacred life of the entire Roman year. They prepared a special sacred salted flour used in the most important public sacrifices. Nothing was more central to Roman religion than getting a sacrifice exactly right, and the vestal's preparation was part of that. They took part in the great festivals that marked the Roman calendar. They drew water from a sacred spring, carried in special vessels that could not be set down. They guarded sacred objects hidden in their temple, tokens the Romans believed were tied to the very survival of the city. In a religion that was less about private belief and more about correctly performing the rituals that kept the gods on Rome's side, the vestals were indispensable specialists, the guardians of the state's relationship with the divine. And she teaches. This too is her work. The youngest vestals, the girls newly chosen and frightened as she once was, must be trained. Every rite, every gesture, every word, every rule for tending the fire, all of it lives in the memory and practice of the older vestals and must be handed down exactly, without error, generation after generation. She was taught by women who are now old or gone. She teaches girls who will still be tending this fire long after she is dust. She is one link in a chain of women that stretches back centuries, and if Rome endures, will stretch centuries forward. The knowledge passes, woman to woman, hand to hand, the way it always has. There is real meaning in this for her, and it would be a mistake to see only the cage. She is not merely enduring a sentence, she is the keeper of something the entire civilization believes is holy. When she carries the sacred water, when she tends the flame, when she stands at the great sacrifices beside the most powerful men in the world, as their equal in the eyes of the gods, She is doing work that no man in Rome can do. That is not nothing. That is, in its way, everything. Evening. As evening comes, we glimpse the thing she gave up and the thing she gained in its place. She will never marry. She will never have children of her own. And in Rome, motherhood was the very center of a respectable woman's identity and worth. She gave that up as a child, before she was old enough to know what she was giving. It is the great absence at the center of her life, and on some evenings she surely feels it. The ordinary human life of a husband, a family, a home of her own children, that every other woman around her is living, and that she will never have. But look at what she has instead. She dines not as anyone's property, but as an honored figure in her own right. Later this very week, across the city, a great senator is holding a magnificent banquet, and among the honors he is most anxious to secure is the presence, or at least the blessing, of a Vestal. Because to have one grace your event is to have the sacred heart of Rome itself acknowledge you. Powerful men court her favor. Her word cancels death sentences. Her name is spoken with a reverence no wife or mother in Rome commands. She walks through the world untouchable in every sense, forbidden to be touched, and impossible to touch. And there is the far horizon too, the thing that waits at the end of the 30 years. Because a Vestal service does eventually end. When her 30 years are complete, she is released from her vows. She may leave, live on her considerable means, even marry if she wishes, though few did, having spent their whole lives in this singular world. Most stayed, having become the thing they were made into. But the door out is real. 30 years of the fire, and then her life, fully her own, in a way it never quite was before, or ever quite could be. It is the longest, strangest version of the same hope we have followed all week. Serve, endure, keep the vow, and at the end, perhaps, walk free. Night. The house of the Vestals is quiet, and somewhere a Vestal is awake, watching the flame, because someone always is. Tonight, for part of the night, it is her. She sits in the round temple in the sleeping forum, the sacred fire throwing its steady light on the walls, the heart of Rome burning quietly in front of her. Outside, the greatest city on earth sleeps, the slave on his mat, the baker's banked oven, the gladiator in his cell. 1 million people under one sky, and not one of them is thinking about the fire. They do not have to. That is the point. She thinks about it so they never have to. She keeps it so they can sleep. She feeds the flame and watches it steady and bright. And she feels the full, strange weight of her life settle around her in the quiet. The power that no other woman holds. The freedom that no other woman is given. The vow that could bury her. The children she will never have. The centuries of women who sat exactly here before her, watching exactly this fire, carrying exactly this weight. She is part of something far larger and far older than herself. She gave up one life to hold the still point of an entire civilization. On a night like this, alone with the flame, she knows it was a strange bargain and a heavy one. She also knows that no man in Rome, not even the emperor, holds anything quite like it. The fire burns. Rome sleeps. She watches. Tomorrow she will hand the watch to another, and the flame will pass on unbroken, as it always has. But tomorrow, we leave the sacred quiet of the forum and step into the loud, glittering, dangerous world at the top of Roman society. Into the house of a senator on the day of a great banquet, where power is bought and sold in whispers, where a Vestal's blessing is coveted, and where, serving quietly against the wall, is a man we have already met. Day 5, the senator. This is day 5 of a week in ancient Rome, and today we follow the senator. It is the year 120. The city is Rome, the largest city on earth. And today we go to the very top of it, before dawn. While the slave lit the fires and the baker woke his oven, the senator sleeps a little longer, but not much, because power in Rome begins at dawn. He wakes in a domus that is less a house than a statement, a sprawling mansion of marble and mosaic and painted walls, cooled by courtyards and fountains, staffed by a small army of slaves who have been awake for hours, making it appear effortless. This is the house we glimpsed on day one from the bottom, the fires, the water, the invisible labor. Today we see it from the top, through the eyes of the man it all revolves around. He has never in his life lit a fire, or carried water, or wondered how the lamps got filled. That is precisely the point of being him. He is, let us say, in his 50s, at the height of a long career. He has held the offices a man of his rank is expected to hold. The rungs of the ladder the Romans called the cursus honorum. The sequence of positions an ambitious man climbed, one by one, over decades, from junior magistrate up toward the consulship, the summit. He has commanded, he has governed a province, he has sat in the Senate through reigns and crises. He carries himself with the deep, unconscious confidence of a man who has never once, in his whole life, been no one. And yet the first thing he does, most mornings, is submit himself to a ritual that reveals the truth of his position, that even at the top, he is enmeshed in a web of obligation he does not fully control. Dawn. The clients arrive. This is the salutatio, and now we see it from the other side of the door. On day one, we watched a slave manage the crowd of poorer men who came each morning to greet the master. Today, we are the master. Our senator sits in his grand atrium, and the clients file in, dozens of them, sometimes more. Freeborn men of lesser means, freed slaves, tradesmen, men who need his influence. A word to a magistrate, a loan, a legal favor, a recommendation, a place at a dinner. In return, they give him the one thing that Roman power actually runs on: presence, support. The visible, countable crowd of men who depend on him and answer to him. This was the engine of Roman society, the patron-client system. Not a side feature, the actual machinery. Power in Rome was not just money or office. It was the size and loyalty of your following. A great man was measured by the crowd at his door each morning, by the men who escorted him through the forum, by the network of obligations he could call in. He gives, and they owe. They serve, and he protects. It bound the whole society together in a vast web of favors, reaching from the humblest freedman up to the emperor himself, because the emperor, ultimately, was the greatest patron of all, and everyone, even our proud senator, was somebody's client. So he greets them, this one warmly, that one coolly, distributing his attention like coin, because every interaction is a calculation. He remembers who is useful, who is rising, who is fading, who is not to be trusted. It is exhausting, and it is essential, and he has done it so long, it is second nature. His power looks like freedom. It is actually 1,000 obligations worn like a toga, and like the toga, it was draped onto him by other hands, and it holds him as much as he wears it. Morning. By mid-morning he goes down into the forum, and here for a few hours, he is genuinely magnificent. He is escorted through the streets by a train of clients and slaves, a moving demonstration of his importance, people making way. He arrives at the political and legal heart of the city, the same forum where the Vestal tends her flame, and he steps into the world he was bred for, the Senate, the courts, the endless conversation of Roman power. He may speak in a debate, he may support a case, or quietly sink one. He trades information, brokers marriages between great families, calculates alliances, measures the shifting weight of who is up and who is down. And here we must be honest about what the Senate was in his time and what it was not. In the old days of the Republic, centuries before, The Senate had truly ruled Rome. It made war and peace, controlled the treasury, governed an empire. But those days are gone. Rome now has an emperor, and has for a century and a half, and real power flows from him. The Senate our man belongs to is still immensely prestigious, still rich, still the pool from which governors and commanders are drawn, still treated with elaborate respect. But it no longer rules. It advises. It ratifies. It performs the dignity of power more than it holds the substance. And every senator knows it, and none of them says it too loudly. Because the gap between the Senate's proud tradition and its actual subordination to one man is the most dangerous subject in Rome. Our senator has made his peace with this, as a man makes peace with the weather. He is powerful in every way that daily life can measure, and he serves, ultimately, at the pleasure of one man he must never openly cross. He is a lion, and he lives in a very large, very comfortable cage, and he has spent his whole life learning exactly where the bars are. Midday. At midday, the senator does what powerful Romans did to relax, to network, and to be seen. He goes to the baths. The great public baths of Rome were one of the wonders of the ancient world, and one of its most democratic spaces. Vast, gorgeous complexes of hot rooms and cold pools and warm halls, open to nearly everyone for a tiny coin, from senators to slaves. The baths were where Rome washed, exercised, gossiped, did business, and simply spent its afternoons. But a man of our senator's rank does not bathe like the crowd. He arrives with his own slaves carrying his oils and towels, takes the finest facilities, is massaged and scraped clean, and attended at every step, conducting half his real business here, because far more of Roman politics happened in the warm, wet, informal world of the baths than ever happened in the formal chill of the Senate House. And here, among the steam and the marble, we see the strange intimacy of Roman society, the way the top and the bottom brushed against each other constantly. In the same great bathing hall, our senator and the baker from day 2 might pass within a few feet of one another, both citizens of the same city, both washing in the same water, separated by an ocean of wealth and rank, and yet sharing, for an hour, the same steam. Rome was brutally hierarchical. It was also, physically, astonishingly mixed. The city pressed all its levels together, in the baths, in the streets, in the roar of the arena, even as it kept them worlds apart. He soaks and is scraped clean, and talks quietly with 2 other men of his rank about the thing that occupies every senator's mind, the emperor. Where he is, what he wants, whom he favors, whom he has cooled toward. Reading the emperor correctly is the single most important political skill our senator possesses. His fortune, his position, his life, all depend on staying in the light and out of the shadow of one man's regard. Afternoon. In the afternoon, the house erupts into activity, because tonight our senator gives a banquet, and a great Roman banquet was warfare conducted with food. This is the Senna we glimpsed on day 1, from the point of view of the slaves who staged it. Now we see why it mattered so much to the man who ordered it. A grand dinner party was not merely hospitality, it was a performance of status, a move in the endless game of Roman prestige, a way of displaying wealth, cultivating allies, repaying obligations, and outshining rivals, all at once, across several hours of couches and courses, and carefully managed conversation. Who you invited, where you seated them, what you served, who was placed near you, and who was placed far. Every detail was a message, read fluently by everyone present. And so the house fills with the labor of dozens of slaves. And here, among them, working quietly, is a man we know. The senior household slave from day 1, lent or hired, or simply moved through the vast machinery of the city that shuffles skilled slaves between the great houses for important occasions, is here tonight, helping stage this very banquet. He knows the faces. He reads the room the way he always does. He fills the cups and vanishes against the wall, holding, as ever, everything he sees and saying none of it. The threads of Rome run through people exactly like him. And tonight, one of those threads has carried him from the house on the hill into the house of a senator, exactly as he half suspected it might. He is invisible to the great men reclining on the couches. He sees all of them clearly. The senator, meanwhile, has staked real prestige on tonight. He has secured impressive guests. He has, through careful cultivation, obtained something that will make the whole city talk. The blessing, the acknowledged favor of a Vestal, the sacred approval we saw sought on day 4, the touch of Rome's holy heart on his gathering. To have that is to be marked as a man in the fullest favor of gods and state alike. He has spent weeks arranging this evening. It has to be perfect. Evening. The banquet begins, and for a few hours our senator is exactly what he has spent his life becoming, the sun around which a room of powerful people turns. The guests recline on couches in the lamplit dining room. Course after extraordinary course flows from the kitchen, dishes chosen to impress and astonish, exotic ingredients gathered from across the empire, wines of famous vintages, all carried by silent, graceful slaves. There is entertainment, music, perhaps poetry or a performance. There is conversation, witty, elusive, competitive, every man displaying his cultivation, his connections, his subtle superiority, while measuring everyone else's. This is Rome at the very top, glittering and rich and clever, doing the thing it does best, turning wealth and power into a performance of effortless grace. And it is real pleasure and real achievement. He built this. The estates, the influence, the network, the standing that let him fill this room with people who matter. All of it is the fruit of a lifetime of careful, relentless work at the top of the most competitive society in the world. He has every right to the satisfaction he feels, reclining at the center of his own creation, watching the most important men in the district enjoy his hospitality and owe him for it. But even here, at his own triumph, some part of him is working, watching, because he knows, every man in this room knows, that a banquet is also a place where reputations are made and unmade, where a careless word travels, where an enemy smiles at you over the wine. He knows the history of his own class, the senators who fell, who were exiled, whose property was seized, who were invited to open their veins in a warm bath because they had displeased the wrong man, or grown too bright, or simply been too rich to leave alone. Roman history is full of them. Wealth and rank did not protect you from that fate. Sometimes, wealth and rank were the very things that attracted it. At the top of Rome, you were never safe. You were merely, for now, still standing. So he smiles and pours the famous wine, and is the perfect host and misses nothing. It is the senator's version of the vigilance we have seen all week, the slave watching the master's moods, the gladiator managing his fear, the Vestal guarding her vow. Everyone in Rome, top to bottom, is watching the thing that could destroy them. His is simply dressed in purple and served on silver. Night. When the last guest has been escorted out into the dark by torch-bearing slaves, the house empties, and the senator is, briefly, alone. The banquet was a triumph. The Vestal's favor landed exactly as he hoped. The right men were impressed. The right obligations were deepened. His standing tonight is higher than it was this morning. By every measure a Roman uses, he won. And he feels it. The deep satisfaction of a game played well by a master of the game. But in the quiet, the other thing is there too. The thing that never fully leaves a man at his height. Tomorrow it starts again. The clients at dawn. The reading of the emperor's mood. The endless calculation of who is rising and who is falling, and where exactly he stands in a hierarchy with only one man above everyone. And that one man's favor, the only true security there is, and no favor in Rome permanent. He has climbed as high as a man not born to the purple can climb, and from up here, the view is magnificent, and the ground is very far away. He thinks, as such men do, about the one figure above even him, the emperor. He has been in the imperial presence many times. He has been favored so far. But he has watched that favor shift for others, seen men as great as himself fall in an afternoon because the light moved off them. Everything our senator has, the marble, the estates, the crowd at his door, the purple stripe, exists, ultimately, at the pleasure of one man. He is the top of the visible world, and there is one figure standing above the top, casting a shadow he can never quite step out of. Outside, the great city sleeps, the slave who served his banquet returning to a thin mat, the baker's oven banked for the night, the gladiator in his cell, the Vestal watching her flame, and a senator in a marble house lying awake at the summit of it all, powerful beyond most men's dreams, and not, for one single day of his life, entirely safe. Tomorrow, we leave the marble houses and the Senate and the baths, and we go back out among the roaring crowds, to the greatest spectacle in Rome, greater even than the arena, where 250,000 people scream as one, and to a man who began life owning nothing as a slave, and who has become, through sheer speed and nerve, richer and more famous than the senator whose banquet just ended. Day 6, the charioteer. This is day 6 of a week in ancient Rome, and today we follow the charioteer. It is the year 120. The city is Rome, the largest city on earth, and today 250,000 people are going to the races. Before dawn. He wakes before the horses, because the horses are the whole of his life. He lives at the headquarters of his racing team, his faction, a large complex of stables, training grounds, workshops and quarters that is part sports club, part business empire, part family. Rome's races were run by professional organizations, 4 great factions known by their colors: the reds, the whites, the blues, and the greens. Each was a huge operation, owning the horses, the chariots, the equipment, and the drivers, employing veterinarians, trainers, grooms, doctors, and craftsmen. A professional sports franchise 2,000 years ago, with fanatical supporters and enormous money behind it. Our charioteer drives for one of these factions, and the color he wears is more than a uniform. It is an identity that binds hundreds of thousands of Romans into rival tribes. The factions inspired a loyalty that modern football fans would instantly recognize and probably envy. Romans supported a color with a passion that could spill into the streets, into riots, occasionally into deaths. A man might care nothing for politics and everything for whether the blues beat the greens. Emperors themselves picked sides. To wear a faction's color and win for it was to be adored by a share of the whole city. He was not born to this. He began, like so many in the Roman spectacle world, as a slave or a boy of the lowest birth, put to the horses young because he was small and fearless and had the gift, the rare, unteachable feel for 4 animals and a fragile cart at deadly speed. He has survived long enough and won often enough to become something extraordinary, a star. But first, before the crowd, before the glory, there is the thing that never changes. He goes to the stables in the dark and he sees to his horses. Dawn. In the grey light of the stable yard, we see the truth beneath the glamour. This is a craft, and the horses are everything. He knows each animal the way the healer of another age knew her plants, and the elder knew his map, completely, by feel, by long attention. The lead horses especially, the ones on the outside of the team who take the strain on the turns, are precious beyond price, and famous in their own right. Romans knew the names of great horses the way they knew the names of great drivers, celebrated them, mourned them, recorded their victories on monuments. A charioteer's fortune and his life rested on these animals, and he treats them accordingly, checking their legs, their feet, their mood, their readiness. Because a horse that falters at the wrong moment on the track is not a lost race. It is a death. And the equipment is life and death too. The Roman racing chariot was tiny and terrifyingly light, little more than a small platform on an axle between two wheels, built to be as fast as possible, which meant built with almost nothing between the driver and disaster. He drove standing up, the reins not held loosely in the hands like a modern rider, but wrapped around his own body, tied around his waist, so that he could use his whole weight to control the team. It gave him power. It also meant that if he crashed, he was lashed to a wreck of splintering wood and panicking horses being dragged around a stone track at full speed. Unless he could do the one thing every charioteer carried for exactly that moment, a curved knife at his belt, to cut himself free before the wreck killed him. He has used it. Most who survive long enough have. He carries the scars of the times he cut free in time, and he carries the memory of the men he raced beside who did not. This is the bargain of his glittering life, and he made it long ago. The adoration, the fortune, the fame beyond any senators, bought with a knife at his belt, and the knowledge that any race could be his last. Morning. As the city streams toward the track, we should see the place itself, because it beggars belief. The Circus Maximus was the largest sporting and entertainment venue ever built in the ancient world, and arguably one of the largest in all of history. A vast, elongated valley between two of Rome's hills, laid out as a racetrack, ringed with tiered seating, and it could hold a crowd that our sources put at 250,000 people. Let that number land. The Colosseum, the great arena of the gladiators, held perhaps 50,000. The circus held 5 times that. It was, by a wide margin, the beating heart of Roman public life, the single place where the largest number of Romans gathered together, and the races held there were the most popular entertainment in the entire Roman world. More popular than the gladiators, more popular than the theatre, woven through the Roman calendar as a near constant feature of the city's life. Down the center of the track ran a long, ornamented spine, decorated with monuments, statues, and a towering Egyptian obelisk hauled across the sea from a conquered land, and mounted on it the devices that counted the laps. Great carved dolphins that were tipped, and gilded eggs that were lowered, one for each of the 7 laps of a race, so that 250,000 people could follow exactly how much of the contest remained. The turning posts at each end of the spine, the metae, 3 tall cones of gilded bronze, were the most dangerous places on the track, the tight, screaming corners where races were won, and where they most often ended in catastrophe. Somewhere in that vast ocean of people today is nearly everyone we have met this week. The baker, closed up for the races, roaring for his color. Slaves given the day, packed in the upper tiers. The gladiator's world and the charioteer's world, the 2 great spectacles of Rome, sharing the same fanatical public. And high above, in a special box, the most important spectators of all, the elite, the senators, and when he chose to attend, the emperor himself, watching from his imperial seat over the whole roaring valley. The races were the one place Rome assembled at its very largest, all of it, all at once. And our charioteer is about to drive out into the middle of it. Midday. Before the race, in the tunnels beneath the seating, our charioteer does the same thing the gladiator did in his cells. He waits, and he manages his fear. He knows the numbers, even if he does not think of them as numbers. Charioteers died young. The lists of the great drivers are full of men who won hundreds of races and died in their 20s, killed on the track, their careers measured in victories, and their lives measured in years that ran out fast. To be a champion charioteer was to live at the absolute peak of fame and wealth, and to know, with total clarity, that the thing making you famous would very likely also kill you. He has seen it. He will see it again. He may be it today. And yet, the rewards. This is the other side of the knife. A winning charioteer earned prize money on a scale that is genuinely staggering. The greatest of them became fabulously, world-historically rich, wealthier than the senators in the box above, wealthier than almost anyone in the empire who was not the emperor himself. A man born a slave, owning nothing, could win his freedom and then win a fortune, and then keep winning until his name was known in every corner of the Roman world, and his wealth beyond the dreams of the aristocrats who came to watch him. It was one of the only ladders in Rome that ran all the way from the very bottom to very near the very top, and it ran straight through the deadliest sport in the world. Our charioteer has climbed most of that ladder. He is free now. He bought it, or won it, or was granted it. The way the slave dreams of, the way the gladiator dreams of. He is rich and getting richer. He carries the same hope everyone in this series carries, except that for him, it is no longer a distant dream, but a thing arriving in his hands, race by race. Security, fortune, a name that will outlast him. All he has to do to keep it is survive. All he has to do is win, again, without dying, one more time, today. Afternoon. The gates crash open, and the greatest spectacle in Rome begins. 4-horse chariots explode out of the starting boxes, and 250,000 voices detonate at once. A wall of sound like nothing else in the Roman world. So vast, it can be heard across the city. The teams fight for position, wheel to wheel, driving for the inside line, because the race is won and lost at the turns, and the inside line at the turn is everything. Our charioteer, reins lashed around his body, leaning his whole weight into the team, threads through the chaos with the instinct of a lifetime, reading gaps that open and close in fractions of a second at killing speed. And it is killing speed. 7 laps around that long track, 7 times around each deadly turning post, with 12 chariots and 48 horses and 12 men, all fighting for the same few feet of track. The Romans had a word for the carnage when it went wrong, the naufragium, the shipwreck, the moment a chariot clipped a wheel or misjudged a turn and disintegrated. Wood and bronze and horse and man tumbling across the track at full gallop, into the path of everyone behind. A shipwreck could take down half the field. It could kill drivers and horses in an instant. And the crowd, let us be honest, as we were about the arena, the crowd loved it, screamed for it, the danger inseparable from the thrill, exactly as it has always been in the sports where men risk death for a roaring public. We will not script whether our charioteer takes the win today, or whether the turn that has killed so many reaches for him too. What matters is what the crowd sees and what he feels. A man at the absolute edge of human daring. 4 animals and a fragile cart and his own wrapped body, moving faster than almost any Roman would ever move in their lives, carrying the hopes and the fortunes and the fanatical love of 250,000 people, around and around the great track, 7 times, at the edge of death, for the glory of a color. Evening. For the ones who cross the line alive and first, the evening brings a fame almost beyond comprehension. A champion charioteer was one of the most famous human beings in the entire Roman Empire. His name known from Britain to Syria, chanted by 250,000 people, scratched on walls, celebrated on monuments and mosaics. His victories counted and recorded, the way records are kept for the greatest athletes today. The very greatest were legends in their own lifetimes, their totals of wins preserved on stone inscriptions that survive to this day, letting us still read, across nearly 2,000 years, exactly how many times a particular man drove out into that roar and came back first. They were not just celebrities, they were the closest thing the Roman world had to gods who could be touched. And here is the paradox that has run through every day of this week, arriving now at its sharpest point. The senator of yesterday, at the very summit of respectable society, was still bound by the emperor above him, by the web of obligation around him, never entirely safe. And here is a man who started beneath everyone, a slave, a nobody, at the very bottom of the pyramid we have been climbing all week, who through sheer speed and nerve leapt clean over most of it, became freer in his fortune, and more adored by the people than almost any senator, and did it in a sport that might kill him any afternoon. Rome was a rigid pyramid of birth and rank, and running straight up the side of it were these two impossible ladders, the arena and the track, where a person owning nothing could, if they were good enough and lucky enough and brave enough, climb higher and faster than blood and birth could ever carry them. The cost was written on a knife at the belt, but the ladder was real. He returns to the faction that evening rich, adored, alive for one more day, and among the horses again, because the horses are still the whole of his life, win or lose. Some of the men he raced against this afternoon are being mourned tonight. He has learned to hold that, the way the gladiator holds it, the way everyone in this city holds the danger stitched into their particular life. Tomorrow there may be another race, and the fortune keeps growing, and the name keeps spreading, and the knife stays on his belt. Night. Late, in his quarters at the faction, surrounded by the wealth his speed has won, our charioteer lies awake with the roar still in his ears. He is living the thing everyone in this series only hopes for. The slave hopes to buy his freedom. The charioteer bought it long ago. The gladiator dreams of a wooden sword and a fortune. The charioteer holds both. He has climbed the impossible ladder almost to the top, from nothing to a fame and a wealth that reach the whole empire. If anyone in Rome has beaten the pyramid, it is him. And yet, lying in the dark, he knows exactly what it cost, and what it still costs. The knife is still on the belt by the door. The turn that kills is waiting at the next race, and the one after that, and it does not care how many times he has beaten it before. His whole glittering life is rented, race by race, from death, and the rent comes due every time the gates crash open. He is the freest, richest, most adored man we have followed all week, and he is one bad turn from being a name on a monument, mourned by 250,000 people who will be screaming for someone else by the next afternoon. That is the bargain. He would not unmake it, but he knows its terms exactly. Outside, the great city sleeps off the races, the baker hoarse from cheering, the slave back on his mat, the gladiator in his cell, the senator in his marble house, the Vestal watching her flame, and a charioteer who beat the whole pyramid lying awake beside his fortune with a knife by the door. He thinks before sleep of the box above the track, the highest seats, where the greatest of Rome watch the races. He has driven for that box. He has heard more than once that the man who sometimes sits in it, the man above even the senators, the man above everyone, watched him win. To be cheered by 250,000 people is one thing. To be noticed by that one man is another. Everyone in Rome, our charioteer has learned, top to bottom, slave and senator and champion alike, lives somewhere in the shadow or the light of that single figure at the summit. Tomorrow, we meet him. The slave who cleans the marble, the baker who feeds the city, the gladiator on the sand, the Vestal at the flame, the senator in his cage of purple, the charioteer who beat the pyramid. For 6 days we have climbed, life by life, all the way up, and tomorrow we reach the top, and the loneliest man in the world. Day 7. The Emperor. For 6 days we have climbed. From the slave who cleans the marble before dawn, to the baker whose ovens feed 1,000,000 mouths, to the gladiator on the sand, to the Vestal who guards the sacred flame, to the senator in his cage of purple, to the charioteer who beat the whole pyramid at the risk of his life. 6 lives, from the very bottom of Rome to very near the top, each one living beside a hidden danger, each one reaching for a narrow hope. Today, we reach the summit, the single figure the whole pyramid points to. The man who owns the slave, is fed by the baker, watches the gladiator and the charioteer, guards the Vestal's flame, and rules the senator. The most powerful human being on the face of the earth. And we are going to discover something strange, that the man at the very top of everything is, in his own way, the most trapped and the loneliest person in all of Rome. This is day 7 of A Week in Ancient Rome, the finale, and today we follow the emperor. It is the year 120. The city is Rome, the largest city on earth, and one man rules all of it. Before dawn, the most powerful man in the world wakes, like the slave did 6 days ago, before the light. And like the slave, he is never truly alone. His name is Hadrian. He rules an empire that stretches from the rain-soaked walls of Britain to the deserts of the East, from the Rhine to the sands of Africa, perhaps 50-60 million people, hundreds of nations and languages, all of it answering in the end to him. He is emperor, the heir of Augustus, commander of the legions, high priest of the Roman state, the source from which all real power in this world flows. There has been nothing quite like his office in human history, and there is no one on earth who can command him. And yet he wakes surrounded. There are slaves in the imperial household, as there are in every great house, who have been awake for hours. And there is something else, something that is with him every hour of every day for the whole of his reign. The guard. Just outside, alert in the dark, stand the men of the Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers whose single duty is the person of the emperor. They are his shield. They are also, and every emperor knows this in his bones, the men physically closest to him at every moment, the men whose loyalty is the thin wall between him and death. An emperor is never unguarded. An emperor is also, therefore, never unwatched, never private, never once in his reign simply alone in a room. From the moment he takes the purple, solitude becomes the one luxury the most powerful man in the world can never buy. He rises in the dark. Somewhere below him in the sleeping city, a household slave is lighting a fire he will never see. In a house he owns the way he owns almost everything. The machine of Rome is already turning, and at the very top of it, the man it all points to opens his eyes to another day of the loneliest job on earth. Dawn. With the light, the empire comes to him, because that is what it means to be emperor. Everything comes to you. The work of a Roman emperor was not, whatever the legends say, an endless orgy of luxury and cruelty. The good ones, and Hadrian was, by the standards of the office, a formidably capable one, worked, constantly. The emperor was the final point of appeal for an entire world. Petitions flowed to him from every corner of the empire. Cities asking for the right to build, disputes between provinces, appeals from courts, requests from governors, complaints from citizens who believed that if they could only reach the emperor, he would set things right. A conscientious emperor read and answered an enormous volume of this, personally. The most powerful man in the world spent much of his day, in effect, doing paperwork for a planet. Hadrian was famous for it, and famous for something more. He did not rule the empire from a couch in Rome. He traveled it. For years at a stretch, he journeyed the provinces in person, inspecting the frontiers, drilling the legions, founding cities, ordering the Great Wall in the north of Britain that still bears his name, walking the actual edges of the Roman world to see them with his own eyes. He was an emperor who wanted to know his empire, not just possess it. Cultured, restless, brilliant, difficult, a lover of Greek philosophy and architecture, an emperor who designed buildings, who could argue with experts and often win, who rebuilt the greatest domed temple in the world. This was no idle tyrant. This was one of the ablest administrators the office ever produced, and the work never, ever stopped. So his morning fills with it. The secretaries, the documents, the decisions that will reshape lives in provinces he may never revisit. A word from him raises a city or breaks a career. The senator from 2 days ago, lying awake reading the emperor's mood. This is the man whose mood he was reading. And Hadrian, for his part, must read the senators just as carefully, because that is the paradox waiting at the very top, and we are about to see it in full. Morning. Here is the strange truth of absolute power. The more of it you have, the more dangerous the people around you become. The emperor commands the legions, the treasury, the life and death of millions. And precisely because the prize is so total, he lives every day inside a quiet, permanent danger that the slave and the baker never face. Because there is only one way to take what he has. You cannot vote him out. You cannot outbid him. The only road to the throne runs over the body of the man who currently holds it. And so the history of the emperors is, again and again, a history of assassination, poisonings, palace coups, murders by the very guards sworn to protect them, plots hatched by senators, by family members, by trusted friends. The most powerful office in the world was also one of the most lethal jobs a man could hold. Think of what that does to a person, year after year. Every friendship is potentially a calculation. Every gift of food carries, somewhere in the back of the mind, the ghost of poison. Every senator who smiles and flatters might be counting the men who would back him if the emperor fell. The guard at the door protects your life and could end it. The heir you choose to secure the future is also, the moment you name him, a man with a reason to want your death. Hadrian himself came to power amid the convenient, suspicious deaths of powerful men. And early in his reign, 4 leading senators were executed for an alleged plot, a shadow that hung over his relationship with the Senate for the rest of his life. He knew, as every emperor knew, that the smiling faces around him contained, somewhere, the ones who would one day move against the throne. This is the cage at the summit, larger and gilded far beyond the senators, but a cage all the same, and in some ways the tightest of all. The slave could trust his fellow slaves in the kitchen, the baker could trust his collegium, the charioteer could trust his faction. The emperor can fully trust almost no one, because almost no one is beneath wanting what he has. He rules the world, and he is, at the core of his days, profoundly, structurally alone. Midday. And yet the office demands the opposite of solitude. At midday, the emperor must do the thing that holds the whole system together. He must be seen. Because an emperor was not only an administrator, he was a performance, a presence, a living symbol that the entire empire needed to behold. Power in Rome was theater, and the emperor was its central actor. He appeared in public, he attended the games, and when he did, 250,000 people in the circus, or 50,000 in the arena, turned as much to watch him as to watch the race or the fight. His face was on every coin in every hand in the empire, the single most reproduced image in the Roman world, so that a soldier in Britain and a merchant in Egypt carried the emperor's likeness in their purse. His statues stood in every city. For most of his 60 million subjects, who would never see Rome, the emperor was the coin, the statue, the name, the distant godlike guarantor that the world was in order. And crucially, the emperor had to manage the crowd, the actual, physical, roaring people of Rome. This is where our whole week comes together in a single space. When Hadrian goes to the circus and takes the imperial box above the track, he sits above the charioteer we followed yesterday, who is driven for that box and dreams of being noticed from it. Below and around him roar the baker, and the freed and the enslaved, and every level of the city. The senator sits in the honored seats, watching the emperor as closely as the race. The Vestal has her reserved place of honor, and the emperor, from his box, performs the ancient bargain we have seen all week: bread and circuses. giving the people the spectacle and the favor that keep 1,000,000 potentially dangerous citizens content. He reads their mood. He responds to their shouts, because even an emperor ignores the will of 250,000 assembled Romans at his peril. The most powerful man on earth, managing a crowd he must keep happy. Even his power has a master, and its name is the people. Afternoon. In the quieter hours of the afternoon, we glimpse the private man inside the office and the specific grief he carries. Because Hadrian was a human being, not a symbol, whatever the coins suggested. He was a passionate lover of Greek culture, an intellectual who surrounded himself with philosophers and poets and architects. A man happiest perhaps not in the throne rooms of Rome, but among ideas, buildings, and the landscapes of the empire he loved to walk. He built a villa outside Rome so vast and strange, it was a world of its own, an attempt to gather the whole empire's beauty into one place. He designed, he argued, he created. There was a restless, brilliant, difficult soul inside the purple. And he knew profound loss, as every human being does, emperor or slave. The great love of his life was a young man named Antinous, who drowned in the Nile during one of Hadrian's journeys through the empire. And Hadrian's grief was so vast, so total, that he did something no ordinary man could do with sorrow. He poured the machinery of the entire Roman world into it. He declared the dead youth a god. He founded a city in his name on the banks of the Nile where he died. He filled the empire with statues of him, so many that the beautiful, mournful face of Antinous is one of the most recognizable images to survive from the entire ancient world. Gazing out of museums 2,000 years later, the most powerful man on earth lost the person he loved most and could not, for all his power, do the one thing he wanted: bring him back. So he did the only thing an emperor could do with a grief that size. He carved it into the whole world and made the empire mourn with him. There is something in that which collapses the distance between the emperor and everyone we have met this week. The slave saving his coins toward freedom. The mother, in another age, another series, running into the reeds for her child. The healer sitting with the dying. Under the purple, under the godhood on the coins, Hadrian is a man who lost someone and could not accept it, exactly like anyone who has ever grieved. Power on that scale does not exempt you from being human. It only gives you a larger canvas for the same aches everyone carries. Evening. As evening falls on the last day of our week, the emperor dines, and even his dinner is not entirely his own. An imperial banquet was the grandest performance of hospitality in the Roman world, and Hadrian, cultured as he was, valued good conversation and clever company. But he ate, as he did everything, watched. Attended by slaves like the man we followed on day one, surrounded by courtiers whose flattery he had to weigh, guests whose ambitions he had to gauge, food that a careful emperor's people had reason to watch. Even here, at his own table, at the summit of the world, the structural loneliness of the office sat beside him like an uninvited guest. He could summon anyone in the empire to dine with him. He could be certain of almost none of them. And so, on this last evening, let us set the whole week before us, all 7 lives at once, as the sun goes down over the largest city on earth. In a house on the hill, the slave banks the fires and returns to his mat, counting the coins that might one day buy him free. Below, in the working city, the baker damps his oven so the sleeping families above him will not burn. In the ludus, the gladiator lies among the survivors, dreaming of a wooden sword. In the forum, the Vestal watches the sacred flame, guarding the luck of a city that could bury her alive. In his marble house, the senator lies awake, powerful and never safe. At the faction, the charioteer sleeps beside his fortune with a knife by the door. And on the Palatine Hill, above all of them, the emperor sits at the summit of the world, richer, mightier, and lonelier than any of them. The man the whole pyramid points to, guarded through the night by men who are his shield and his shadow both. 7 lives, 1 city, 1 week. Bound together by 10,000 invisible threads, the bread that climbs from the oven to the palace, the coin that carries the emperor's face into the slave's hand, the games where all of Rome roars as one, the flame that the whole city believes keeps every one of them safe. Rome was a pyramid so rigid it assigned every soul a place and a fate, and it pressed all those souls together, top and bottom, into a single, roaring, breathing organism, unlike anything the world had built before. Night. On the last night of our week, the greatest city on earth goes to sleep, all million of it at once, from the mat to the throne. And the emperor, the most powerful man alive, lies awake in the dark at the top of everything, as the slave lay awake counting coins, as the senator lay awake reading his mood, as the charioteer lay awake beside his knife. At the summit, the same human wakefulness. He thinks, perhaps, of the empire turning in the dark beyond his walls, the frontiers he has walked, the cities he has raised, the 60 million lives that rest in some final sense on his judgment. He thinks, perhaps, of the face of the one he lost, that he scattered in statues across the world so he would never have to stop seeing it. He thinks, as powerful men do at the end, of what will remain. Because this is the last thing the emperor knows, the thing that levels him at last with every other soul in this series. He will die. Emperors were made into gods after death by decree of the Senate, but they died first, like everyone, and Hadrian, in his final years, would sicken and suffer and write a small, famous, haunting poem to his own departing soul. A few gentle lines from the master of the world, wondering where his spirit was about to go. The man who ruled everything faced the one door no power could open or close, exactly as the slave faced it, and the gladiator, and the baker. The purple does not exempt you. Nothing exempts you. In the end, the emperor and the slave lie down in the same dark. And that, in the end, is what a week in Rome reveals. Not marble and eagles and glory, or not only those. 7 human beings, from the bottom to the top of the greatest city the world had yet built, each carrying their danger and their hope, each the hero of their own unwritten story, each as fully, achingly alive as you are reading this now. The slave, the baker, the gladiator, the vestal, the senator, the charioteer, the emperor. Rome was not its monuments. Rome was them, a million souls under one sky, holding a civilization together with their labor and their courage and their fear. 2,000 years ago, on the banks of a river, under the same stars that are turning over you tonight. Outside, the fire of Vesta burns on in the sleeping forum, tended by a woman keeping the luck of a city that will one day be dust. The emperor closes his eyes at the top of the world, and Rome, all of it, from the mat to the throne, sleeps. That was a week in ancient Rome. Tomorrow, they will all rise and do it again. But we will not, because our week is done. So that was the finale, the emperor, and the whole city entire. We followed him from the loneliness of waking, guarded in the dark, through the endless work of ruling a world, into the permanent danger that shadows absolute power, up to the imperial box where all of Rome roared beneath him, and down into the private grief of a man who lost the person he loved and carved that loss into the whole empire. The most powerful human being on earth, and, in the ways that matter most, as trapped, as watched, and as mortal as the slave who lit his fires. That was the paradox at the summit, and it was the paradox this whole week has been building toward. That in Rome, at every single height, the human being underneath was living beside a danger, reaching for a hope, and bound to everyone else by threads they could not see. 7 days, 7 lives, 1 city. From the slave who cleaned the marble to the emperor who owned it, and the astonishing, invisible web that connected every one of them into a single living thing. That was Rome. Not the postcards, the people. And every one of them was as real and as human as you. Thank you for spending this week in ancient Rome with me. If it changed how you picture that world even a little, if the marble is now full of people, then it did exactly what it was meant to do. Watch the whole week from day one if you joined part way. The Slave in the Dark is where it begins. Subscribe, because next time we step into another city, another age, another 7 lives. And tell me in the comments, which of the 7, the slave, the baker, the gladiator, the vestal, the senator, the charioteer, or the emperor, stayed with you the most? As always, we'll see you in the past.